ready to go.
Excellent.
I should have put on a suit and tie.
Oh, don't worry. It's still... You haven't got the weather for it.
Okay. Look, first of all, thank you very much for joining us in doing this and addressing an extremely important issue. You know, anti-Semitism is, unfortunately, you know, continues to be a very serious issue. You know, every time you think it's quiet and everything is okay, things happen. People say the most outrageous, craziest thing about the Jewish people. So it's, I'm delighted to be able to have a conversation with you about Muslim anti-Semitism and the role that you have played as the chairman of Muslims Against Antisemitism in addressing this very, very important issue. So just want to thank you for your efforts.
Well, I'm honored to be with you. I'm very much delighted to be here to discuss a very, very serious and you know, rapidly deteriorating rather than improving subject. I'm honored to be part of.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Work in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you, I have a lot of questions to ask and I want to get your insight and your input. But you know, just in the past week, there's been an interesting development. You know, people talking to each other, people getting to know each other, Muslims, Jews, other people. You know, when you talk, good things can happen. If you don't talk, it's not a good situation. So, you know, we have relations between Israel and Egypt. We have relations between Israel and Jordan. You know, while things are not very warm in terms of the people of those countries, but there's been peace. And I think everyone recognizes the benefits of that peace between these two countries. But now we have this new development with United Arab Emirates. And I know that you have a very personal connection with that country. You have very close relationships with people in that country. Why do you think the United Arab Emirates was the next country to suddenly say, we're going to talk to Israel, we're going to have a relationship? I know things do not happen overnight. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but maybe you could give us an insight. What exactly happened? Did it take a year, 2 years? Why did things change that suddenly we have this beautiful new relationship and maybe others to follow as well?
Well, thanks very much. I mean, the UAE, I think, the starting position is really the UAE that has very much been building itself from scratch in under 50 years. In 2020, the UAE managed to send a probe to Mars, a cutting-edge technology dealing with coronavirus, the first nuclear electricity generator in the Arab world, and now this agreement with Israel. It's a country that last year had a year dedicated to tolerance and hosted the Pope for the first ever visit by a Pope to the Arabian Peninsula. And that really is the ethos that the founder of the UAE, Sheikh Zayed, who founded it on tolerance, and that continues to be really the ethos of what the UAE is. It's a country that wants to be and very much becoming like Andalusia. Where the many great things happened between Jews and Muslims, Maimonides and others were able to flourish in that really infrastructure, common ground of tolerance.
Right.
UAE is a country that wants to be the golden age, to recreate the golden age of good relations between Jews and Muslims in particular, and obviously others, and you know, Hindus and Christians and all other faiths. But obviously,
tell me about the people, the citizens of the UAE. in terms of, let's be honest, with Egypt, with Jordan, you wouldn't have an Israeli minister walking down the streets of Cairo shopping. You wouldn't have that in Jordan either, because I don't think they would survive very long. It's different. The countries have good relations. Sisi of Egypt, very good relations with Israel and Jordan as well. Tell me more. I believe the people in United Arab Emirates are different, that they may actually welcome a real relationship between not just the governments, but also the people. Am I correct about that?
You're absolutely right. I think really this goes down to two things. One is the practicality of things, that the UAE was never at war with Israel. The UAE became independent and was established in 1971, well after the wars between Israel and the Arabs. Unlike, for example, Egypt and Jordan, and so there is no direct animosity. But the second, more important one, I think, is the fact that, particularly after 9/11, the UAE has realized that extremist Islamist education that has infiltrated even UAE curriculum in the past was the cause of so much hatred that was brewing in the ranks, amongst the ranks of pupils and ultimately of the population once they grow up. And so the UAE revamped the population, removed anything that could contribute to hate speech, extremism, anti-Semitism, anti-Christian teachings that are still very much prevalent and very much in existent in other states in the region. Islamists, particularly the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and that's for the security forces to deal with. But Muslim Brotherhood is not. It's an organization that is legally operating, for example, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, where I am now, and that runs many mosques, that teaches anti-Semitism. The UAE a few years ago said, well, we're not having any of this, and we're stopping it. And that's why we're educating our people, not on basis of a political party that is a pan-Islamist one that does not believe in the concept of nation state, but we're building a new society built on values of tolerance, which ultimately is the real Islam. I mean, in as far as
and that's really the key, because when people hate, it comes from someplace. People aren't born to hate. A baby doesn't hate. As the young person, the baby becomes older, doesn't hate unless, as you have, unfortunately, in many places in the Middle East, even the Palestinian Authority, when kids go to school, they're learning in their textbooks, Jews are being portrayed in an extremely negative way. So when those young people grow up and they get older, of course they're going to hate Jews. It just makes sense. I mean, in a sense, that's what happened in Europe. That's what happened during the period of Adolf Hitler, prior to Hitler, during Hitler. Yes. So this is a key thing that you're telling me about. Let me ask you personally. It takes courage to do what you're doing. It's the right thing, but it takes courage. There's no question about it, because there is so much hatred in the radical Islamic community all over Europe, in America, very, very filled with hate, Holocaust denial, many things that are said by Islamists really emulate, Goebbels in Nazi Germany, the Jews this, the Jews that, all the, it doesn't change, anti-Semitism doesn't really change that much. So what is it like for you to be a public figure, a respected businessman, but you are out there, you are doing, God's work in terms of threats. Are you safe? Do you feel comfortable? Your family? What is it like for you personally to stand up and say, I am a Muslim, and what that signifies, but you know what? we can work with the Jewish people. They are truly our brothers. Tell me what it's like deep inside when you put your head on the pillow.
Well, I mean, thanks very much for raising this. The issue of this is something historical that we're continuing. My family comes from Jerusalem, and my parents are still there, and we've had a very strong and long relationship with our Jewish brethren for centuries. And what is happening, on the political arena should not spoil what happens in those sort of relationships. I'm simply continuing what we've both, as Jews and Muslims, have been doing for centuries, and one, in a way that what I'm doing is the natural state of affairs. What Islamists and extremists are doing is the unnatural one. So they're the ones who need to be uncomfortable, not us, because we're doing what we're being taught and brought up and created by God to do, essentially. Interestingly, I mean, you've raised the issue of Islamists in Europe, in the UK, and I visit many synagogues, and you go there, the security obviously rightly there, but unfortunately, I remember visiting I was telling a friend, the only synagogue that I visited that there was absolutely no security, and you felt absolutely no threat, was in Dubai. And that's sort of that is a reflection of the education. You know, in Dubai, I walked in. I've attended Shabbos and I've attended Passover Seder. Literally, you walk in and you walk out. No one asks you anything. You go to a synagogue in Europe, you've got to be searched, and it's like you're going to an airport.
Like an armed camp.
Absolutely, and that is absolutely wrong. That is not a natural thing for a holy place, for a place of worship to be. And it's not just synagogues; it's also school nurseries and supermarkets. And
right.
That's not natural. That's not humanity. That's bestiality. That's what animals do. And this is what we're confronting. We're trying to drag whatever we can drag back into civilization.
Ghanem, let me ask you, in your opinion, what is driving this incredible hate? I mean, it is very serious. You know, when people are ready to go out and machine gun a synagogue or blow up an establishment, create chaos, I mean, that's serious. That is very serious. What is driving these movements, these radical movements? And also as part of that question, what I'd like to know, the average Muslim, okay, you know, the family, the mother, the father, the children, they want a future. They want to be able to enjoy life and, you know, not sacrifice their life, but to enjoy life. So tell me, you know, things are serious. There are serious problems in Belgium, in England, in France, and so on and so forth. And you're doing what you can, and there are others who try to do. But how do you address this incredible hate? And within the families that you know, what do they say privately, you know, when they are talking to each other and no one is listening?
I mean, there are two levels here. One is the leaderships who sends the Islamist leaderships. I'm not talking about the Bin Ladens, because they're really not cases, and those guys are sort of the problems of the security forces. But I'm talking the leaderships of political extremist Islamist movements who have a worldview where they do not believe in the concept of a nation state. And they would want to create the caliphate. They want to create a pan-Islamist state. And Erdogan is now trying to do it in Turkey. He wants to recreate a neo-Ottoman caliphate that
right.
has a total disregard to nation states. That's the leadership. The population who subscribe to them are obviously subjected to the educational systems. Social media is another problem that has become, in social media platforms, have become a main source of anti-Semitic education. There's, there are accounts here and there that we can complain about and they get shut down, but that doesn't go into the chat rooms of people sharing videos and sharing teachings and sharing things that we simply cannot see, because but social media has created those underground tunnels where information, vile information, deeply anti-Semitic information, can be shared amongst pupils, among communities, and they would trigger someone to go and detonate him or herself.
Yeah.
Um,
Ghanem, let me ask you, if you were in charge, you were the interior minister in England, France, whatever, and you were the prime minister, what policies would you implement to put a dent into the hatred that's being spread? In America, there's a lot of talk with Facebook and Twitter and everything in terms of hate. And it's a whole new movement that did not exist a couple of years ago, to control those who are spreading hate. Because those who are spreading hate, there are people listening, and then they act on that hate. If people listen to something often enough, you become a hater. What would you do, or what would you urge in England, where I believe you live, and some of these other countries? I mean, we have such a big problem. You're doing your thing, but the problem is huge. What would you do if you had the reins of power?
Social media needs to be regulated, because it's clearly not, providing what it should provide. It no longer is a platform, but it is now a publication that enables extremist views to be disseminated and spread around. So I think it's urgent for the governments, individual nation states, to regulate social media. You've got the social media giants, Facebook, Twitter, and Google, based in Ireland for tax purposes. And they're simply not, the Irish government is very happy to have them, because obviously they pay taxes, but at the same time, they're not subjected to the same media laws that is really causing many mainstream publications, newspapers, and to go bankrupt, because people no longer subscribe to them or use them.
Right.
Social media are taking the money of mainstream newspapers, whether left-wing or right-wing. I'm not talking about where the politics are, but at least newspapers, where they stand. This newspaper is left-wing, whatever, fine. You buy it, you don't buy it.
Right.
But subjected to laws, to libel laws, to regulation. Social media isn't. It's taking their money away. So it is depriving us of having the ability to choose what opinion we want to have. But at the same time, it's just running, governments need to act on social media.
So is anything being done in Europe similar to what's going on in the United States with these different platforms in terms of hate? Because there's a lot going on in America, as you know, and it continues and it builds. But is anything going on in France, England, and all the other countries?
There's a lot of noise being generated. I'm involved in my capacity running sort of anti-extremism work, various cases against social media giants. They, there's a lot that needs to be done. We're getting nowhere. We might get an account shut down, but it's
right.
Nothing is being done. No, governments are talking. The thing is, even mainstream media is scared to even publish articles that are critical of Facebook or Twitter, because of the $500,000 advertising that they get from those. But at the same time, they're running organizations bankrupt. So you're talking about organizations like Facebook and Twitter, who have more money than nation states now. They're absolutely huge. And if governments are not ready to act, and they're not ready to act, they talk a lot, but they haven't done much yet.
Right.
I'm afraid that we live under a social media dictatorship.
Yeah. Let me ask you, let's get down to the meat a little bit. In terms of the hatred, radical Islamists hate Jews. I think we may be #1 on their list.
Yeah.
but they also hate America. They also hate Western civilization. But let's talk about the Jewish people in terms of Islamists. What is it about the Jewish people? There's the Israel factor we'll discuss, but is it, if there was no Israel, but only Jews and Muslims, would there still be a problem?
Absolutely, I would think there would be a problem. Yes, I think it's you know, Israel is a country that was created when you know, most Muslims were not even born. You know, we talk about what, 70 years ago. So the history is gone. Israel, I think, is an excuse now. You know, that anti-Jewish hatred. You know, if Israel says, right, I'm closing, I'm changing, I'm going to call myself State of Palestine, the hatred is going to still continue, and there will still be anti-Semitic attacks against.
So what is it about the Jewish people? That's what I want to. Is it material in the Quran? I mean, you know, by the way, I read the Quran myself 30, 40 years ago, and I looked at some of the things before we would do this show. Is it the Quran where there are certain, you know, it depends how you interpret things. You can interpret things in many, many ways. Is it that the radicals claim that Islam says the Jews are evil, the Jews need to be gotten rid of? What exactly is it? Is it the religion that they interpret a certain way that requires them to do the things they do? And it's not just Jews that when they bomb places in Europe, it isn't always Jews that it's directed against.
No, I mean, it's the interpretation of religion, and I think one is the interpretation, and the second thing is the literal interpretation. So the interpretation of how they interpret things. I mean, if you even take, you know, you take verses, whether it's from the Quran or the Bible, and you start going literal, you know, the whole universe would
right
disappear. I think they use religion as an excuse to propagate their aims. I mean, obviously, you've got the more extreme. So there is a political reason why organizations, you know, this is political Islam. They distort religion in whatever way they deem is appropriate to achieve their aims, which is create you know, take control of things, whether it's Islamic State or Erdogan now. It's and religions. I mean, you know, whatever religion, including Islam, including the Quran, you know, you can't take things out of context, and there's so many things that can be interpreted in so many ways that I think you know, the regulation of fatwa is an important one, because how you interpret Islam and how you interpret the Quran. For example, there was one of the cases that we had to deal with in the UK was a fatwa app, an app on the phone on fatwas that was started by the Muslim Brotherhood, and the chairman or the head of the effort was Yusuf Qaradawi, who is banned from the US and the UK, and was deeply anti-Semitic. And we made a complaint to Google, and within hours they've removed it. And it obviously was a big headline, but it's still there, but obviously they removed a lot of things, but there's still things that we're not happy about. But the point here is that fatwa, the interpretation of religion, is you know, you could issue whatever fatwa you want, and people believe it. And once it's now there are countries like the UAE, for example, we spoke about the UAE, like Jordan, like even Egypt, where the subject of fatwa is very much government regulated. Now, fatwa is essentially a law, and you tell people what they can and they can't do. And that is why I think, you know, France, for example, is a very secular country. They're very reluctant to interfere in what mosques do. But at the same time, they've got to interfere. Otherwise, you will have fatwas being issued that lead to extremism and terrorism and wrong interpretations.
In your opinion, European governments who have been subjected to a lot of terrorism over the past 10, 15 years, are they at a point now, do they get it? Do they understand are they dealing with it in a more serious fashion? I mean, they know what's going on. Look, you have large Muslim populations in many countries in Europe, France, England, Belgium, etc. Germany, of course, let's not miss Germany. Does the government have things under control, in your opinion? Or, you know, sometimes governments have a tendency of not dealing with a problem sufficiently, you know, not addressing, yeah, we have a problem, but it'll be okay, it'll go away. Do they realize what a threat these radicals are?
Well, I think they realize they're a threat, but I think they seem to have reached a point where it's let's just manage the not the social Islamism, political Islamism, but let's just manage the suicide bombers once they've got the vest on themselves.
Right.
And that is a big mistake. And they've obviously security forces and infiltrating mosques, but that sort of, and at the same time, they do not want, for example, to there's 500, for example, Muslim Brotherhood mosques in France. Why are they allowed to operate? And the answer is there's a lot of investments coming from places like Turkey. I mean, Germany, we mentioned in Germany, DITIB, D-I-T-I-B, is an organization of that is connected to the Turkish government that appoints mosques, imams in Germany. Now, it's clear, it clearly is not in line or does not serve the purposes of the nation state of Germany. Governments are very, they're aware. No, we can't say they're not aware. They are aware, but I think they're reluctant for either commercial reasons or being deeply infiltrated by Islamists, particularly the Muslim Brotherhood that has led, whether it's Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, or Bin Laden, the leader of Qaeda, both of whom have come from Muslim Brotherhood teachings. These people are still allowed to operate mosques. The Muslim Brotherhood may not go and detonate a bomb there, but they're the ones who lead.
Right.
And that's what government need to go to, the fundamentals of where the problem is, the roots of the problem. They haven't dealt with that yet.
Right.
Egypt has dealt with it. The UAE has dealt with it. Jordan is dealing with it to a large extent. Saudi has also dealt with it. But Europe is really impotent on that front.
Right. Let me ask you, unquestionably, for the whole world, just about, the Israeli-Palestinian issue is an important issue everywhere, no question about it. Two-state solution, one-state solution, no solution, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And this has been going on forever. It is the only conflict between two people that, after all the years and all the attempts and all the rhetoric, that we are nowhere closer. In fact, we're further from actually solving the problem, okay? I mean, over the years, now obviously I have my point of view, and I try to look at things as carefully as I can and try to be fair, but I know that over the past decade or so, that there were two prime ministers in Israel, Ehud Barak from the Labour Party and Ehud Olmert, also from the Labour Party, who were both on the verge of making deals with, at that time, Yasser Arafat, and with Ehud Olmert, it was Mahmoud Abbas. I mean, where the Israeli prime ministers were prepared to make the most unbelievable concessions. 97% of what I call Judea Samaria, the West Bank. They were ready to divide Jerusalem. They were ready at that time with Clinton and Barak and Arafat at Camp David. We all remember those days where, when I read about the deal, I said, the Israeli prime minister is out of his mind. He's committing suicide. How can he possibly do what he wants to do? But it was on the table. It was offered. Arafat walked away. Mahmoud Abbas with Ehud Olmert. So, and the refugee problem, which is never ending. There've been refugees in so many different countries after World War II, after World War I. You don't hear about any refugees in the world except the Palestinian refugees. It's almost like they are being, not maybe, but they're being used as a pawn to continue the conflict. So from your perspective, you know, what is going on? I mean, just imagine if there was peace between the Palestinian Authority and Israel, if they had, you know, today the people of Israel are not supportive really of much of a peace process, only for one reason, because they don't believe there's a partner. In past years, polls that were taken among the people of Israel showed that 75, 80% of the people of Israel were ready to make concessions for peace. But that has changed because of all the terrorism, etc. What is it? How do you look at the leadership of the Palestinians in terms of serving their people? You know, everyone would have benefited if there was peace.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think the current leadership of the Palestinian Authority, which is really the PLO, has run out. You know, its mandate has run out. It has no electoral legitimacy. It has, I mean, even essentially, they've been imposed by the through the Oslo process in 1993. From 1993 until today, they've received over $35 billion in aid, which could have transformed the Palestinian territories into Dubai or Singapore, or but instead it took the quality of life of the Palestinians in the West Bank from something that was reasonably close to what the Israelis were living in during the full Israeli occupation, to something much worse. They've actually worsened the prosperity of the ordinary Palestinians, but at the same time managed to plunder $35 billion from aid across the world. So they've definitely failed. Their interest is not the interest of the Palestinian population. I think if you leave it to ordinary Palestinians in the street, they would, and ordinary Israelis, they would. There is no issue of creating peace, and whether it's 1, 2, or 500 or no states, that's besides the point.
Right.
That's details. The Palestinian Authority, the PLO, are a bunch of a group of people who have they live a very comfortable life, and they've really been milking the conflict, or the misery of the Palestinians, whether in the West Bank, Hamas in Gaza as well, or even the refugees in Lebanon. I mean, why are they still refugees in Lebanon? I mean, it is an absolutely disastrous humanitarian situation, and I do not trust that the PLO or the PA would be able to reach a deal with the Israelis, even if they would not want to. Why should they? The international community is pumping money to them. They live very comfortably. I mean, they don't even have to hold elections, and no one complains. I mean, unfortunately today, the British Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, went and visited Ramallah. I know people talk about, you know, two-state solution, God bless it, but it's just, it has reached a point where there is no longer acceptable.
Yeah, but Ghanem,
Yeah.
Isn't part of the problem many of the democracies all over the world, including the United States, not so much the Trump administration, but Democratic administrations in the past, and even Republican, because everyone talks about this two-state solution, fine, okay, but nothing happens. There's no facing reality that there's a serious problem, you know, with one side. I mean, generally, it is unfortunately the Palestinian side, in my opinion, that has perpetrated this refugee problem upon their people who are, first of all, you know, calling the Palestinians refugees and living in refugee camps is not even an accurate description. They don't live in hovels. They don't live the Palestinians today in Judea and Samaria do not live the way it is described in this poverty. Just not true. And by the way, I always, all the years of the conflict, you know, we have a refugee problem, we are told. Do you know that every Palestinian could have had a mansion if over the years, the, you know, Saudi Arabia, other countries with all the petrodollars, you know, from the 70s and 80s and 90s, etc., every Palestinian could have been living in luxury if someone really cared about addressing the problem. And unfortunately, you know, the rhetoric, even on the part of the Western world, I mean, the Germans, the French, the English, is still the same talk. I don't think they get it, that there's a serious problem, that there's maybe possibly no solution.
Well, I mean, as I said, I mean, in the past 20 years, $35 billion have been sent to the Palestinian Authority. More money has been given prior to that, and unfortunately, it's been totally mismanaged. There's obviously a lot of vested interests in the West as well as in the Middle East for the conflict to continue. No one seems to want to have it resolved, particularly the powers that be, unfortunately. But perhaps with this new track that has been created recently, maybe there would be an impetus to solve the problem from the basic level, rather than go back to an attempt that's been tried for 70 years and hasn't worked.
Right, right.
I mean, why continue with something that hasn't worked? It's just silliness.
Yeah. Ghanem, who do you think, which country, in your opinion, is next to establish relations with Israel? I have a feeling you know. I have a feeling you have a pretty good idea.
Well,
can you talk about it in general? I mean, who's next? Number 2, number 3, number 4, and how much of an impact will this have? Because the more countries in the Middle East that say, we want to deal with Israel, we want to have a relationship, we don't have to agree on everything. We can disagree, but we need to talk to each other. So where is this going? How serious is it? Saudi Arabia, where are they? I know that, I think it was their foreign minister who said that, you know, until the Palestinians and the Palestinian problem is solved, we can't, even though all of them have relations now off the record. But in your opinion, what can we expect? I know the Trump administration said we may have another surprise in the coming weeks. Where do you think the next country, the next country, the next country?
I mean, I think it's, I mean, the list would probably include Bahrain, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Morocco,
Sudan.
I mean, they said they're not ready, but maybe Iraq, interestingly, is one to keep an eye on. They seem to
really.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be an easy one. But the Iraqi Prime Minister is in Jordan today, meeting with King Abdullah and President Sisi of Egypt. They're probably going to be talking about the joint Iranian-Turkish threat. So he seems to be dragging Iraq slowly into. Lebanon is one that I would keep definitely closely watch, because Lebanon is the one that needs a solution to its problems. And
well, what about the problem with Hezbollah?
Well, that's not going to be an easy one, but you know, it's not going to be a straightforward one. But I think people would be talking about a solution. You know, if I would keep an eye on Lebanon as well.
Interesting.
I mean, I would not keep. Even Algeria did not criticize the UAE-Israel deal. You know, it's a spectrum, I think, of which countries are at the front and which are at the back. And I can't think of any country that would not ultimately sign a peace deal with Israel. It's just who's first. And I think the more visionary, moderate ones like Bahrain and Oman potentially are
right
front of the queue.
Yeah, let me ask you. This happened under the Trump administration, and they seem to be actively involved in pursuing additional relationships. is it the Trump administration that should get credit for this very positive development? I mean, everybody agreed it was positive. Even former Vice President Biden. Does the Trump administration get special credit, or this was going to happen regardless of who was in the White House?
No, I think Trump should get a lot of credit for doing the deal, and I mean, I even thought that he deserves, along with Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed and Netanyahu, a joint Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, if anyone deserves it this year, it's them three. And I think Trump definitely has done more to create peace than many of his predecessors, certainly Obama, who you know, under whose administration he got the Nobel Peace Prize, and then you had total disintegration in Syria and ISIS was created. But on the other hand, you've got Trump, who actually finished off ISIS and signed a peace deal. I mean, if you want to look at things objectively, I think Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, and I think he needs to. He deserves a lot of credit for achieving it.
You know, it's amazing having this conversation with you, and the possibilities of so many of these nations. I mean, who would have thought that was possible 10, 15 years ago? So let me ask you this question. How much of this new development with United Arab Emirates, followed possibly by a number, 4 or 5, half a dozen other countries eventually, how much can we thank Iran?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, if it's not Iran now, there'll be Turkey. There'll be someone else coming in the future. Who knows what? But I think Iran has been it's been a common threat for a long time, and I think countries realize they need to work together to deal with that threat. Frankly, I think if Trump stays for another 4 years, there's probably less likelihood of war breaking out than if Biden came, in a way. So Iran is one of the reasons, perhaps, why peace is good for the region, including for Iranians, than this being a reaction to Iran.
Yeah. Let me first of all, when travel becomes more like it used to be when you come to America, I want to invite you now. We would love to do a public event with the Jewish community and others to do what you're doing in Europe, in England. Let me ask you, when you appear at a synagogue and you are speaking to a Jewish audience, okay? It's an experience to have a Muslim against anti-Semitism speaking to them. What precisely do you say to them? Look, Europe, a lot of problems, a lot of issues, a lot of concern, like you said. You go to a synagogue, I've been all over Europe, you have guys with submachine guns standing outside. In fact, many synagogues, you don't even know it's a synagogue unless you have the address. There's no sign, there's nothing because of the fear. What a sad commentary. How sad is that that is the reality of life in Europe. When you appear to a group, a Jewish group in a synagogue or anywhere else, and they're watching you before you start speaking, what is Ghanem going to say? What is your message to them, your basic message?
Well, basically that we're not as different as might be in the media. There are crazy Muslims who want to kill Jews. No one hides the fact that there are. But there are also Muslims and Jews who want to be not only friends together, but they want to have extremely strong relations. We want the closest community to us to be the Jewish community. And we want to create long-term alliances to fight extremism and hatred. And that's the message. That's how it's been for centuries, and that's what we'd like it to continue as. I mean, there's been bad episodes in history, of course, no one denies that. But what we're saying is that this is the time for us to realize that we've got so much more in common, that we've got to forget about any historical issues that might have existed and look forward to the future. because we both need each other.
Yeah. You know, two of the things that, and then we'll go to questions. I know we have a bunch of questions. Am I right, Israel? We have a bunch of people who want to ask questions from all over. But there are two pieces that I want to ask you about. In all over Europe and also in America, the protocols of the Elders of Zion, that notorious forgery that was used throughout, you know, the 20th century and into the 21st century, you know, this document that was created, which, you know, blames the Jews for everything, the Jewish conspiracy, the international, you know, there are Jews all over the world, you know, it's news to me, but people believe this. They believe these lies. I imagine if you hate, you want to believe whatever someone is going to tell you. But, you know, you said before on the internet, you know, so many times people come to me, you say, oh, you see what I just saw? Oh my God, you know, you see what they're saying about Dov Hikind? You see what they're saying about Ghanem? And I say, who wrote it? Where did it come from? Oh, they have no idea. You know, as long as they can read it, it's true. You know, it's very, very dangerous. And then you also have, which the Muslim world, the radical Islamists, Holocaust denial. You know, denying the Holocaust. It doesn't matter that my grandparents went to the gas chambers. My mother was in Auschwitz in 1940. You know, Holocaust denial. It didn't happen. Not that many people were murdered, et cetera, et cetera. How do you address those things, Ghanem?
I mean, those things are there, and they've been there, unfortunately, since you know, Jews became a nation, and they will continue, unfortunately, to be there. But that hatred will continue to be there. The important thing is just to try to eliminate as much as possible hatred and racism and extremism. Unfortunately, is there all the time. It's just I think what we need to do is to deal with whoever is propagating it, the media, the channels, the social media, the schools, the educational systems, that people, you know, simply stop believing them. And I think, I mean, it's funny now that I'm thinking, you know, people accuse the Jews of controlling the media, but they can't do a proper PR campaign to protect themselves. I mean,
Right.
It's you know, it's unfortunately that's the reality. But I think it's important for us as Muslims and for everyone else to work with our Jewish brethren to help them deal with this evil that almost destroyed the Jewish nation a few decades ago.
Yeah. Ghanem, are you hopeful as you know, do your part, and everyone needs to do their part. That's very, very important. Everyone in their own way needs to do their part. So do you have Muslims who come over to you very quietly, no one should see, and say, I agree with you, you know, you're right, you know, what is the reaction that you get within the Islamic community? Is there hatred towards you? I mean, you say a lot of things they don't want to hear because they're hearing something else from others. What is it like?
I mean, obviously, you know, there are people, we need to change people's opinions, and what we're doing sort of hopefully helps change people's opinions. And there are people who agree, but there are a lot of people who disagree, and people who are closeted in their response that they agree, but they don't want to say it. And I think the more vocal we are, the more comfortable people who agree quietly will be vocal about it, and hopefully convert people who have the opposing opinions, the wrong views, in changing them. I mean, that's the reality of it, and that's the struggle that we're involved in.
Right. We need more people like you. That's for sure. We can agree on that. More people to speak out, stand up, send that message. It's not about you and I agreeing on everything, but it's about us respecting each other, having a dialogue, an honest dialogue. And if you do that, you can only make progress. So we're going to go to people's questions. And I have, okay, we have We're just figuring this out. We've got a lot of questions, I see. So here we go. What's the question, Israel? Okay. Okay, someone says here, can I mention the name or I shouldn't mention the name? Is that okay, Israel? Bernice Lipkin, kill the Jews is embedded in the Quran. So how can you get rid of this message without ignoring the Quran? You know, this is a part of our discussion before, you know, where people say there are certain things in the Quran that, you know, hey, it says that Jews are this or whatever it may possibly be.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with holy books, it's so difficult to interpret in the historical context of any verse that was given that you know, people, you know, if you wanted to kill anyone and find religious justification for it, I think all religions would probably have some verse that would probably be applicable to do that sort of hatred. The interpretation is the important thing, and I think the spirit of the Quran definitely does not talk about killing not Jews but anyone, in my opinion. But that's yeah.
Yeah. Let me just quote a line from the Quran, 109-6. It says, "To you, your religion; to me, my religion."
Yeah.
And that basically is saying respecting each other. Here's another one from 2-256. There is no compulsion in religion. Obviously, that shows very open, you know, but there are other things. Here's something that was given to me, 8-12. I will cast terror in the hearts of those who disbelieve. Therefore, strike off their heads and strike off every fingertip of them. I mean, that's a pretty, you know, that's a pretty strong thing. But, you know, there are things in Judaism which, if read, I can say, if without any kind of interpretation or commentary, can be very much misunderstood. I'm not an expert on the Quran, but, you know, people can misuse anything.
Absolutely. I mean, in a way, the Jewish religion is blessed by having so many wise rabbis who know how to interpret things, whether it's
right.
And I think that's I think that is something that Islam needs to look at things more spiritually and not literally. There are a lot of people who do it, but that literal translation of things is a problem. In a way, the Quran, I believe, is almost a translation of the Torah. There's so many similarities. You know, when you read the weekly parasha, for example, you would almost in every week find something similar in the Quran that corresponds to it, that mirrors it. Sometimes you get even identical verses.
We'll go to the next question, Israel. What? Okay, so how are we doing? Unbelievable, an hour went by. That is amazing. I want to tell you, first of all, this has been fascinating talking with you, and I look forward to talking to you after this program. I have something in mind. There's a lot to do, and now that I have actually met you and I see you and we've interacted with each other, I look forward to our relationship. By the way, behind you, there's something in Hebrew on the wall. What exactly is that?
I study Kabbalah. That's all Kabbalistic writing. There's a potato and there's
what is that? What is it?
Is it
some kind of Hebrew?
Well, there's this one, which you should know.
Oh, okay. Whatever. Okay.
That's my office. So.
Okay. So Ghanem, listen, I thank you so much for doing this with us, and look forward to meeting you in New York or maybe in England, whatever. But I will talk to you because I think we need to send the message. You and I are brothers.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you that right now. We just met. You're my long lost brother.
and I
Okay?
absolutely feel exactly
And
the same.
we are going to have a relationship, and like I said, respect each other, try to address things that need to be addressed. I know you want to be there for the Jewish people. I want to be there for things that are important to you, Ghanem.
That's a great honor, and I entirely reciprocate everything you've said. Great
Thank
honor.
you.
I can't wait to meet in person and
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you, Ghanem. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you very soon.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the best. Take care. Bye.
To you too.